Are you curious about how to get in the door? Are you curious to figure out how you can take that person's job in 15 years? Are you curious to figure out what the next trend is and how you can relay it to your brand? If curiosity is what drives you, which it does drive me, you're going to go far, right? Because you're always trying to figure out what's next. You're always trying to figure out where I can go to get to like that next opportunity. So I think you just want to always show curiosity, like just be curious about things, ask questions, ask as many questions as you want. But I think also just be passionate, right? Like if that's what you want to do, you should always be 100%, 110%. And like, this is what I want to do, and really showcase that to people.
Welcome back to Have a Map, where we talk all things career. I'm your host, Mamadou Njai. It is Good Friday today, so it is a double Good Friday. Let's just say that. But today we have one of our talented interns who has been killing it on our social media page. I think we've grown from like 600 followers to 800 followers, which, you know, doesn't seem a lot to all of y'all, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we only had 300 followers. So we've been able to grow tremendously during this time. So Jackie has been killing it, but Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I graduated from Hamline University last year, so I'm one of those pandemic graduates. Graduated right at the beginning, so no ceremony or anything. It's okay, I'm over it. After that, sort of just online job searching. Saw this internship post that was basically like, do you have no experience? Do you want some experience? We'll give you some experience. So I'm interning with DIM right now, and that's the latest.
Beautiful, beautiful. And where are you located?
St. Paul.
Beautiful, beautiful. No, I'm a fellow Minnesotan, so I feel the vibes. But yeah, let's get started. Let's get our host or our guest in the mix today. Nico, can you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're calling in from.
Absolutely. So my name is Nico. I am a social strategist at an agency here in Chicago called Digitas. I was born and raised in the northwest suburbs. Have been in actual like Chicago for the last 7 years, working in advertising for the last going on 4 years at a few different agencies. Again, landed here at Digitas in October of last year. So yeah, happy to, talk all things social, all things marketing, and hopefully leave some people inspired today on this Good Friday.
Hey, great way, great introduction. So, we always talk about these terms and these titles, and sometimes I know what these titles mean, sometimes I have no idea what these titles mean, but every title means something different, and at every job, those titles are kind of interchangeably had, and those duties day to day might look a little different. So for you, what exactly does your title mean? Like, what type of work are you actually doing at an agency like that?
Yeah, I think that's a completely fair question. I think, advertising has a way of creating new titles for essentially the same positions. And, you go to one agency and you have this title and you do this job. You go to that agency, it's another title, but you do the same job. So it does get a little confusing sometimes when you're looking at different agencies and different jobs. But essentially, when you break down at least my position that I currently am at, it's a split between half of being like a community manager. So essentially, the community manager is, responding to comments on your brand social channels. The community manager is identifying influencer opportunities or things that you're noticing on your brand social that you can then leverage into the actual posts that you create, like what we call content. Your community manager is also handling crisis management, because a lot of times brands will sometimes make the wrong mistake, say the wrong thing. And so then you have to deal with like the PR backlash. And so you're always trying to figure out the best way to properly put out your fire. So that's kind of like one part of being a community manager. The other half of this job that I have is more so the social strategist. And so that is really just working with some of the higher up people on the team to put together your creative briefs. And so that creative brief is where you're figuring out what, consumers are into. So you're really gleaning for insights and figuring out ways that you can take your client's business objective, tie it into an insight that you're seeing, and then put together what we call a deck, which is just a PowerPoint. It's just a phrase for it, to essentially brief the creative team. And so then the creative team will be constantly looking through the insights and seeing through like our strategists' recommendations, and then actually going and making the post. So we kind of, as a strategist, your job is really handling that up front and figuring out like pop culture trends, figuring out what people are actually interested in, and putting that together in a document for your creative team to then go create the actual content for your branded social channels. So sometimes those posts that we create can be organic, where they're just essentially living on our brand's channels. And then on another time, they could also be paid. So we, as in the agency that I work at, we are the creative AOR for a few clients that I work on. And so we work with our media agency counterparts. And so we create the actual assets, the creative posts, and then we give them over to the media agency so that they could traffic and work on the back end and like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and actually like build the ad and target it to the right people. So, a lot of times there are sometimes people want to figure out, like, do they want to go into the organic and like the creative agency side when they work on social, or do they want to go to the media agency side and work on the back end? There's a lot of different opportunities for you when you look at like the social landscape and where you could go.
That is so many jewels and gems that you just put in there. And I think it's really interesting because I always tell our interns and people that I talk to, students and things of that nature, is like a lot of what you all do on your free time can be applied to the agency work that people are doing. The difference is you have to understand how to connect the data and explain it to the client or to the creative team to create that work. So I think, what you talk about is it's really great, because now you have an understanding of, I understand trends, I understand those things, but then it's the tie-in. So now I know something that I can work on to actually get to that space. But yeah, so many jewels, so much great information just in that first segment. So I'll let Jackie speak.
Yeah, decks, familiar with those because of this internship, made a lot of decks. So my next question is sort of like, in your day-to-day life, in your workspace, like what does it look like? Has it changed pre-COVID, post-COVID? Has it stayed pretty much the same for you? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The day-to-day, I will say, of like outside of work. So I think take it back a little bit. The one thing that like strategists kind of are known for are kind of being like pop culture enthusiasts. You're kind of like always looking for why people are doing things, or going out to like music events or going out to galleries and trying to like get all of this information wrapped in your head. And some of it is great and some of it is completely pointless, but learning all of those things can help you understand why consumers are interested in things. And then you take all of that back to how this can actually make sense for our brand, right? So like you're learning all of these things. And so because of COVID, sometimes those things outside of work, as like going to a museum or going to a music concert or going to like these community-based themes and meetings and things like that, like aren't really taking place anymore, obviously because of restrictions. And so sometimes it's a little harder to kind of figure out what is that next new thing, right? You're just always on the computer now. That's really like your only way of finding new sources for inspiration or whatever, new tech updates, what people are interested in. So it's made that part of the job a little harder, right? Like you're just always trying to figure out what's next. And because you're not able to find it, it makes it a little harder. But in terms of the actual job stuff, yeah, it's definitely been a lot different, right? I think what people miss about being in an office together is that quick, like 5-minute chat that you can have with someone after a meeting. Be like, hey, did you see this email that we just got? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Now you have to rely on, are they even available at this time? Because everyone is just constantly in a meeting. Everyone is on a phone call or Zoom, Teams, whatever. So those look like 5-minute quick conversations where you can just huddle together and like put that, plan together, sometimes doesn't come as quick anymore. So it's made people have to just kind of like trust their gut and kind of sometimes just act and do what they think is right, because not everyone is as accessible. Not saying even before and pre-COVID that people were so accessible, because meetings was always a thing within the ad industry where you're just constantly always in meetings. But I feel like it is like doubled to the point where people's entire days are just back to back to back to back on these calls. And even after a call, you need another call after that to kind of like, did you understand what people were saying? So it's definitely made this a little bit stressful. I will say, working from home though, speaking to a positive side, I think also has helped a lot of people as well. I think having a little extra time in the morning, you don't have to worry about a commute or coming home as well. So there's positive and negatives to all of this. I think it really depends on how you want to look at it. For me, I could say that I've experienced both positive and negatives, where there are things that are kind of unfortunate, but then there are things that you go like, I'm glad I'm in a position where we are able to work from home in a pandemic, right? Like not everyone has that luxury. There are people who still have to go into their office, or not even their office. They just have to go to their job, right? Like forget advertising. There are people who are actually doing like real jobs, right? Like being a grocery store employee or just being a doctor, where you're constantly around people. So we have that luxury of not having to do that. And we haven't done it for over a year now. I think March 12th was the last time we have actually of last year we've been in an office. So it's been over a year. I think coming all out of this, as the vaccines start to come and restrictions start to loosen, what will be interesting to see is how kind of offices and just 9-to-5 culture continue to pivot, right? Like, are we going to go back to exactly what we did, which was 5 days in, 2 days weekend, and then come back Monday? Or are we going to do a mixed approach where it's you're in 3 days, maybe you work from home 2 days? So I think that's what I'm most curious to see on how we continue to move this forward as we kind of get back to maybe what was considered normal.
Definitely. I'm curious to get your thoughts. What do you think? Because, as a student coming out of college, just thinking in that mindset, like, what is this even going to look like? What do you think a student can do to prepare for that? And maybe it's just being flexible and being nimble, but what do you think is going to kind of happen, and how can you prepare for that?
As in regards to like not knowing if you take this first job and like you're going to be able to be in an office and around employees and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, it is tough, right? Like I will say my current job now, like I had started during the pandemic. So I still haven't met my current employees now, we've had kind of jokes like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get into my actual floor the first day we go back, because I have no ID to be able to like actually scan to get in. It was also one of those things. We just had a little meeting the other day, and we kind of just put together this fun little game. And it was like, can you guess your employee's height? Because none of us have actually like met each other. So to get to your actual question, I think, are there things that you can do to prepare? Kind of. You could read a bunch of articles that HBR does, or just kind of talk about, or people that talk about really what this constant working environment from home has, done for employees, ways to actually improve your work-life balance too, because I think that is a big thing where people are kind of getting caught up on, right? It's like, because you always have your computer by you or your phone, there's no like detachment anymore. So I would say that's the biggest thing to first figure out. And then I think after that, it's really just like scheduling like one-on-ones, because a lot of times you're just in meetings all day and just like work related stuff. But I think the most important thing is like figuring out ways that you can actually meet your colleagues like a little bit more on a personal level, right? What we used to do is like after work, you would go to the bar together, or you would hang out around in the office together. And like those things they don't exist anymore. So you have to figure out ways to adapt to that in a digital space. So how can you create like weekly one-on-ones or happy hours with your employees so that you're ensuring that you're still connecting with them on a personal level? You're understanding, how they're feeling outside of work, because so much of the time we talk is just about work-related stuff and status items. So I think that's the biggest thing. If you're going to be entering into a new job, like figure out ways where it's a weekly get together with your team, with your department, and ensure that you're like checking on their mental health, because this is a big toll for a lot of people, right? And every day we're faced with something new to try and figure out. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing, is just read some articles. There's a lot of articles that have gone out on like ways that you can maximize your time by working from home. And then on top of that, I would say just actually schedule some time with your employees and like get to know them outside of a working relationship. And I would say also, if they are comfortable with, doing a social distance, like hang out outside, knowing that weather is starting to get a little warmer now, you can also look at that as well. So I would say those are some things that you could do to kind of like help ease your way into that new situation.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, especially the one-on-ones. You can, schedule time to, and even as you go in person, right? Scheduling those one-on-ones is going to
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got into this space. Because, I'm assuming me and you are probably close to the same age. So social media was probably very new when it came into the marketplace, and people didn't think of it as much of a thing that needed to be done or be kept up with. And once they did realize it, everybody ran and tried to figure it out on their own. So how did you get into that space of working in social media?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, I am 27. So I have been actively on social media for probably 15 years. I would say the first memory of me being on social media was MySpace, and I was active on MySpace at 12. I loved that platform. And right then and there, I kind of realized that I was going to be spending a lot of time on this thing that was called the internet. And I was going to have a lot of fun with it. I was 12. It was dial up. It was AOL emails. It was bulletin comments on MySpace. It was top 8. It was everything. But what I liked about it was the opportunity to, highlight and showcase your interests and figure out ways that you could then connect with other people, right? And I think that is always the common theme that we see with social platforms. It's you highlighting your interests and then other people highlighting theirs, and then you basically come together through that connection of your shared interests. And I think that just kind of trickled on into the years and years, right? It was MySpace first, and then it was Facebook, and then it just continued on with platforms, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So I always had this passion for just like being on the internet. It opened me up to meeting so many people, learning so many things, understanding culture. And so that constant like drive of wanting to figure out like what was going to be next, right? Like that it's always like, what's the next platform now, right? Is it Clubhouse? Like, is it Dispo? What's going to be next? So I would say that constant drive is what made me interested in social. However, when you're young, you don't know what jobs there are, right? Like, I obviously knew what advertising was, but I didn't know who was creating the ads. I didn't know that there was an agency involved. I had no idea of that. So, as I got older, I'll actually get to the question now. So as I got older, I actually moved to the city, and I had started a website called Chicago Creatives. And essentially Chicago Creatives was this platform where I was highlighting creative individuals from all different mediums and showcasing their story, right? These artists could have been, grinding for 15, 20 years. They could have been people who had just started 3 years ago, but essentially it was really trying to highlight everyone that was doing things. I thought, at the time there were music blogs, Fake Shore Drive, Lyrical Lemonade, these days, and they were doing great things, but very music specific, right? And that came with obviously Vic and Chance and all those artists who are really pushing Chicago on the map. But I felt as if there were a lot of other artists in different mediums that were doing interesting things that, maybe weren't getting that same press. And so I wanted to highlight those stories. So running that website, I got familiar even more with like social media, not just from like a how to use it, but more so from like a business perspective, right? Like how can I actually put something out there and figure out the best way to promote it, to market it, to say something about it. And so I would do these interviews with people and I would figure out the best way to go to social with it. You know, I would bring a photographer, we would take these photos and then we would promote it on our Instagram. And so, you know, I really started to get more into understanding how to use these platforms from like a business perspective and not just from like a personal use, like, hey, this is my macaroni and cheese that I just made and I'll take a photo of it, like the early Instagram days, right? And through running this website, I started to find out of an ad agency in the city called Havas. And that at that time, it was ran by this guy named Jason Peterson. And for those who don't know, Jason Peterson is also a photographer on the side and a very hefty, large social following, I think over 1 million followers, but he was the chief creative officer at Havas. And what he was doing was basically hiring people who kind of were like me, right? Like they didn't come from a traditional advertising background. They didn't go to a university for advertising. They had just this passion for social media and passion for creating content and was like, you're already doing that. Why don't I give you a salary and you could do that for my brands? So I really just appreciated like the community that he was building here in the Chicago ad industry. And, you know, luckily I was able to meet him and do a bunch of interviews with, you know, a lot of Havas employees on my website and was able to land an internship. And that internship was a social strategist position. That was my first way into the actual ad industry. And that internship opened my eyes. I'll tell you that, because I thought I knew like what strategy was. I will say that I took that internship and I actually learned what strategy was. A lot of times, you know, you're young, you're thinking, oh, posting times or what days you want to, and you think like that's strategy, right? And sure, maybe there is something to that, but really it's more so like, why are we doing this? How is it going to be best for our actual brand? Like that's what strategy work is, right? So it was a great opportunity for me. I learned a lot. I got to work on a lot of fun clients. I had a really great manager. Her name was Natalie. She was able to bring me to like all of these client meetings and allow me to actually like lead as an intern, like lead projects rather than just be treated as the intern and doing the intern projects. And I was super thankful for that because that's what I wanted. I wanted that client experience. I wanted to understand like, you know, the ins and outs of being a social strategist at an ad agency. And that was really how I got my start. But I will say, you know, it really comes to being passionate. And I think that's what really kind of made people interested in me, because I was running this website. It was doing things that we already do in advertising. And I was essentially just taking my passion and turning it into a career.
Definitely. And just a few quick questions to touch base on that. So for the viewers, because we have a different pool of interns and people who look at this, you did not go to college for advertising, correct?
I went to school for graphic design. Okay. And then I switched over to fashion marketing. So I did not major in actual advertising though.
Gotcha. Nope, that's really good. Because I think it's always good for people to know, like, even if you major in something, you can transition. Like I was an econ major, now I'm doing entertainment, branding, all type of crap. So yeah, like, you can switch over, and it's not as hard as you think.
Exactly, and I think because of the fact that like you have the ability to create your own projects now because of easy access of these social platforms and just the internet in general, where you can create your own sense of advertising, right? Like it's your website, it's your side project, it's your side hustle. And essentially like that eventually will take you to where you want to go if you continue down that path of staying consistent and just going for it, right? I think that was the one thing, again, that people just liked the fact that I had this website, I was passionate about it, and I was doing things that were advertising related. And so it felt like a seamless transition to just be able to go into the ad industry. I think there are a lot of people nowadays who don't really just have advertising backgrounds anymore, or backgrounds, I mean, as if they went to like a 4-year university to study advertising. I think, you know, people could come from all different walks of life and be able to start in advertising. I think that we're breaking down those traditions of like, you need to go to this university and study there for 4 years as an advertising student, and then look at going to an ad school after that, portfolio school, and then you can be a junior copywriter. It's like, I just don't think that for some people that works, right? And I think, but we're kind of getting past that point where your side projects and side experience can be able to vouch for, where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
That was a big worry at my school, actually, because they're like, we're starting to sort of feel useless. You don't really need the middleman anymore, like you said. I also did have another question for you. So your passion comes through just hearing you speak. It's like, it's very obvious. And I was wondering like how you take sort of your pop culture brain and you put that into your work. Like, do you have any examples or favorite projects of things that you've done?
Absolutely. I think that's the fun part of advertising, right? It's like, you're kind of that middle person of, you have this money that your client has, right? And then you're also in the middle of where your brand could fit, and then where technology and pop culture is happening, and then figuring out where you can then push your brand to get to where those conversations are happening. So, a lot of times what we'll see, and we've seen it with Clubhouse, we've seen it with Dispo, we've seen all of these new apps that are kind of like popping up right now that are very like community focused, right? They're not like the traditional forms of social media where it's one to mass, like a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's kind of like people are in these closed rooms or these chat rooms where they're all kind of aligning on these similar topics. And I think, the constant drive for wanting to figure out what is new is also what gets clients interested as well, right? Like, clients are just like, they're humans. So what they're trying to figure out is, if there's this large group of people who are now shifting to this new app, how could we get our brand to be a part of that? How could we say, we know that there are 1 million people on this new app over here, and we want mac and cheese to figure out a way to organically fit into this new app that's taking place over there. And you, as the strategist, have to figure out the best way to recommend that opportunity to your client. You have to know the platform in and out. You have to know the most authentic and organic way that you could seamlessly fit this brand into this platform, where people may not also be interested in advertising, right? Or interested in wanting to necessarily hear from what a brand has to say. So all of those things where you're like learning these things outside of work, which is like very pop culture driven, and what people are saying, how they're conversing, what platforms they're conversing on. You have to figure out ways in which you could take that information and then apply it to your brands. And so I think for an example, this past month, in the month of March, I was tasked with this new project at the agency to work on this client where, for the entire month of March, they launched this new product and they wanted to jump on agile content. So reacting to things very fastly that was taking place on the social channels. And so you would see memes come up, or you would see specific copy phrases that people were saying. And so they wanted to figure out the ways that then they could jump on those trends, right? And so as that strategist, you had to identify those trends and key moments that are taking place on social, and then trickle that down, sell it into your client to say, like, this is why we think it's going to actually work for us. Here's the insight, which is blah, 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 blah. And then you just eventually, like, your client will buy into it. I think what we did was, this product was, it essentially was a mash of it basically was just a mash of products of like what we called it was in the refrigerated dessert aisle, but it also had like candies on top, like Hershey's brand candy. So like Kit Kat and Reese's, and then you would mix it. And for an example of one that we did from an agile perspective is when Ariana Grande and Lady Gaga had won Best Pop Duo. Knowing that there were two people who came together for this performance, our product was two things coming together. That was our insight in a way that we can then jump in and like celebrate with Ariana Grande and Lady Gaga, right? Because it was this collision of them two coming together. It was our product being a collision of two things coming together. And that was our way of like selling it into our client to be like, this is why we want to jump in on this opportunity, because we feel like it's a perfect match for our brands. And so those are those things that you kind of like are aware of, the Grammys are going on. So how can you tie your brand to these moments and these trending opportunities on social? So it's fun. It's a lot of work sometimes because you're trying to figure out the best way that you can do it without just coming across like, oh, that's just, look at that brand just commenting on that post because Ariana Grande usually has 15 million likes or whatever, right? So it takes a lot of hand holding sometimes to ensure that your client is actually aligned with the recommendation. But when you eventually get those ideas approved upon, it feels good because you're moving so fast, the way Agile works, the way that social media trends just come and go, so when you find the right one for your client, it's a lot of fun to just jump in on and see the reaction and see people also like point out like, oh, that it's so funny to see you guys here. Like we could see the natural, connection between you all. So it's fun when you could find that right idea.
Love that. I think that's really cool. And I think, one thing that I always think about is in this fast-paced environment, especially working at an agency, what do you do for self-care? Because, as a fellow creative, I understand how draining and exhausting some of this stuff can be. But if you're not mentally there, you can't think of the ideas, you can't tap into what's going on in pop culture. You can literally break down or melt down. So what do you do to like reboot and kind of refresh yourself?
Amazing question. I know I'm always kind of like starting with great question, amazing question, but I really think that is a very important question to ask. So I will say, as I'm looking at my refrigerator right now, I see my goals for the week. It's a weekly goals thing that I put together. So I see gym, read, meditate, and write. And I would say those four things really kind of help me stay focused and allow me to take my brain from thinking just about work and kind of just staying calm and focused and just focusing on me then. And I think, I'm an early morning person. So that is one thing I know not everyone is. I like to start my day around 4:15, just straight every day. And what the mornings allow me to do is allow me to be like the most calm and focused because I haven't been inundated with texts or Slacks or IMs or emails saying, hey, where's this or where is that? So it allows me to do some of those things, which is to read, to write, to meditate with the most calm and focused mind, right? My mind hasn't been jumbled with all of these thoughts or thinking about work yet. So I'm able to kind of, I'm just able to use those things to really help me stay focused and calm. So then when I do eventually get into my work day, I'm not like stressed already. I already have a clear head. I'm not like, oh, dang, did I do this? Did I do that? Like, I'm just ready for the day by the time 9 o'clock starts. Some people are night people, and so they could do that routine at night. But I think what you always want to do is figure out those ways that you can calm your brain down, right? And whether that's before work, whether that's after work, whether that's writing, running, working out, meditating, like whatever it is, you need to figure out and find time specifically for yourself to do that because you're going to get swept up in the day-to-day work at most times. And sometimes you're not going to eat lunch or you're not going to eat breakfast or you're going to be working till 7 o'clock at night sometimes, and it's like, so you need to always ensure that you're prioritizing yourself at times. Again, that could be in the morning, that could be throughout the day, that could be at night, but if you're not, no one else will, so luckily I will say I do have a very good manager who we come into one-on-ones and she's asking like, what was one positive thing you did during the week or the weekend? What are you interested in right now? Like, how's your mental health doing? And, sometimes you appreciate that because a lot of times you go into status meetings and it's just about work. And, when you can have those open conversations with your colleagues and your managers about, prioritizing your mental health, ensuring you're getting out of your apartment for the day and just going on a quick walk, you appreciate that because not everyone's willing to do that. So if sometimes you're not going to have a manager like that though, right? Where they're kind of looking out for you as well. And so if you're not looking out for yourself, you know, sometimes you just fall into that constant cycle of needing to be online at all times and needing to work at all times. So it's important to figure out the best way to be able to detach yourself from your 9 to 5 and relax. And, you know, the more calm you are outside of work, you're able to bring that to work and act calmly as well.
Jumping off of that, I sort of have a follow-up. It has, like, your online time, is it hard to sort of keep the enjoyment and the work aspects separated? Have they merged into one? Like, are you always on social media with like work in the back of your mind, even outside of work hours?
Yeah, for me, for me, for sure. I mean, it is bad for me. I could say that. Like, I am just constantly always on social media, like scrolling and figuring out ways where, like, okay, how could we do that? I saw McDonald's jumped on that meme. And so, like, how could we, you know, do that as well? Are we McDonald's though? Can we? It's like always running through these questions in your head. Like, can I do this? What's going on social today? What's going on TikTok today? How about Instagram? How about Snapchat? You know, and like the list of channels continues to grow and grow. You know, 10 years ago, it was 3 platforms. It was Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You know, now you multiply that by 4 platforms. You know, there's about 8 or 9 platforms that you constantly are like in rotation to figure out the trends and moments. So yeah, it can be a lot. And it is hard to separate that using social platforms just as a way to like get away from work, or are you using the social platforms solely for figuring out ways that you can merge that with your work? It is tricky because, you know, in order to work, you have to be connected to these Facebook pages or Instagram. So it's like, even when you're working, you're on Facebook technically, right? Like, you have to go to Facebook and you have to go to Ads Manager, and then you go to your actual brand's profile. So like, you're of course going to scroll through your Facebook before you go to your actual client's page. Like, that's just natural for us to do. So yeah, it is hard to separate that. And I think they've been trying to work on things, you know, obviously screen time, where you could can see how much time you've been on your phone, but you just have to realize sometimes you just got to put it down, and someone will send an email of like the new trend update or new app update the next day, right? Like, when you work in large companies, there's going to be newsletters constantly going out about, you know, all new tech updates. So you could just rely on that sometimes and not have to be just like the first person to know everything. But I will say, I am that person. I need to be the first to like know everything. So it's all about kind of like personal preference.
As we kind of come to the end of our interview, what is something that someone can do starting tomorrow who's interested in your career field?
I would say the most important thing, I think, or a few things that I think you can do. One is use social media. No, but seriously, I think you should use social media as a way to use it as a networking opportunity. I think there's been so many people that I've been able to meet, not only from like a work perspective, but just in general, right? Like, so I would say that the platforms, if you're looking to get into like advertising or marketing or whatever, I would say, you know, prioritize LinkedIn, obviously first. That's more of your business platform, where you're able to ensure you're connecting with people who are in the same field or industry or department as you. And, you know, the fun thing about that is you could always see their career trajectory and, you know, kind of see where they started and now where they are. And I think that could be your kind of like entry in, right? Of starting that conversation, of seeing where they started, and maybe you started at the same college as them, and that could be your entry point. But I would say LinkedIn is a great platform. I would say the other thing that you could do is, you don't need a side project by any means. I don't want to put it out there because I know there's a lot of like controversy where people think that in order to get into advertising, you need a side project, you need a side hustle. Not saying you do. by any means, but I think that it can allow you to one, meet a whole bunch of people, two, gain a whole lot of experience, and three, sometimes you can get past some of those first steps because they see all of these things that you're doing on the side. So they can be like super curious about what it is that you're doing and how you can take what you're doing and like kind of bring it into the agency world. So I really just think the important though, when it comes down to it, is if advertising is what you want to do, or social media or marketing is what you want to do, I think you just need to start connecting with the right people and showcasing your passion. I think passion is one of the most important things as a young employee. I think it's passion, and I think it's curiosity. Are you curious about how to get in the door? Are you curious to figure out how you can take that person's job in 15 years? Are you curious to figure out what the next trend is and how you can relay it to your brand? If curiosity is what drives you, which it does drive me, you're going to go far, right? Because you're always trying to figure out what's next. You're always trying to figure out where I can go to get to like that next opportunity. So I think you just want to always show curiosity, like just be curious about things, ask questions, ask as many questions as you want, but I think also just be passionate, right? Like if that's what you want to do, you should always be 100%, 110%. And like, this is what I want to do, and really showcase that to people, because that's what's going to make you stand out compared to the other employees who are like, yeah, I'm a millennial and I've been on social media for so long, so that's why I want this job, right? It's like, no, like show them like you know this job. Like it's not something that you just want, it's something that you know that you deserve. And I think, by just constantly networking and talking with people, you'll eventually get someone to vouch for you and give you your first opportunity.
I'm feeling so inspired right now, ready to go apply everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that is the and then on the flip side, you sometimes have to deal with the hard part of like rejection, right? And with applying either comes a 50-50 chance of getting your positive outcome or your negative outcome, but you can't, get weighed down by the negative outcome. One thing I always told myself is you're going to get a lot more no's in life than you get yes. So embrace the no's, just like take it in, and eventually you're going to find out where it is that you need to be, and the universe will put you in that exact position, right? So don't get discouraged if you're and trying to get your first internship and an agency denies you, or you're trying to get your first junior level or entry level role and an agency denies you. It's part of the process. It sucks at times, it hurts, but you realize that you're going to be fine, and you're going to get the next one. So again, you get a lot more no's than you get yeses. So just continue to stay focused and prioritize what it is that you want, which is your end goal, which is just getting a job somewhere.
Great advice. Great advice. Very, very good advice. And my last question, and this is for all of us that we can answer, is if you had to pair a song or an artist or an album with the last few days or week of your life, what song, artist, or album would that be, and why?
Who wants to start it off? Oh, you got one?
Jackie said she had one. So
okay, I do, because
Okay,
it's just been playing in the background recently. Mm-hmm. So it's an instrumental piece. It's a Waltz No. 2 by Dmitri Shostakovich. Wrote it down for us. It's the main theme from Eyes Wide Shut, if that rings any bells. And it's just like the perfect waltzing music. It just puts me in, it makes me want to like throw an event with Dim Events where we just go rent a ballroom and we all dress up and dance. So that's what I've been listening to.
I'm all for that.
Came prepared, showed us up.
She did. I'm going to let you go next then.
Oh, man. Okay. I will say, just for whatever reason, it came to my head for the people listening, we did a little pre-production where we asked this question. So I was kind of thinking throughout the time of like, what song or album or project has kind of been encompassed of my life of these last couple of weeks or days. And I would say, and not to this extent, but I would say it's kind of tied to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West. Now, I'm by no means saying that my life is even close to putting out one of the greatest hip hop albums of the last 20 something years. But if people remember, leading up to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, there was a lot of chaos in Kanye's life. And he had said some things that rubbed people the wrong way. Obviously, the Taylor Swift incident and doing a lot of things. And he kind of then rose up and put out arguably his best project. And I think that constant kind of like chaos is what ended up driving him to put out his best work. And I think these last couple of weeks have been, pretty stressful for me with, some of these, things going on. And I think through those like stressful situations, I was able to learn a shit ton, and I eventually got out of it. And I think that kind of is why I feel as if just like that constant chaos and that pressure is what eventually landed me on creating some of these more fun and exciting, opportunities for our client this month. And, it was stressful at times, but I'm happy with the end result. Let's say that.
Yeah. That's a good one. I like that. I was just listening to a song on that.
My favorite album of all time.
Yeah. That's literally freshman year for me when that album. People don't understand, this is a tangent, but people don't understand what he did before that album. He basically put out a whole project even before that album dropped, when he dropped a song every Friday on Good. It was literally called Good Friday. Every Friday he dropped a song up until that album. And that was like all those songs. If you put all those songs together, which I found somewhere that had them as like a project, that is a fire album, man.
Oh my God. Everyone was on them too, man. I mean, that was when like Good had everyone, so those features were just crazy.
Yeah, no, that was a good one. I'm gonna pick this song. It's off of the Black Messiah soundtrack, but What It Feels Like, because I love Nipsey Hussle, and I'm actually reading one of his books right now. But not for Nipsey, for Jay-Z, because I think there's nobody who's been in rap who's been able to do what he's been doing on his business acumen side and still come in and rap about relevant content like he hungry and new in this industry. And that's how I've been feeling with like some of the deals that we've been doing. We've been working on, experiential marketing stuff that we're growing and we're killing it. But then now working on, creating diverse pools of talent for these larger companies is the other space. So it's diving into both of those spaces and understanding, what it feels like. So I definitely like that. And that's what I would choose.
Great. Can we just touch on how we came full circle with the Good Friday thing? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. The Good Friday thing was crazy. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, every Friday I almost think about that Friday.
Yeah, I know. It needs to be on the streaming platforms.
It's probably a lot of, you gotta get a lot of yappers. Yeah. A lot of people clear some stuff. So
yeah. But that's a great record. That was also a great movie too.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good movie. Really good.
Jesse Plemons. Ugh.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Well, Nico, thank you so much. What we always like to do is give everyone a round of applause because we like to give them their flowers. But thank you so much for coming on here, dropping gems, chatting with us, because, you have taken time out of your day to do so, especially on your off day. So we appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I think these are always the fun things for me, right? I didn't really have, someone who I considered like a mentor when I first got into the industry who kind of was able to show me the ropes per se and say, these are the things you need to do in order to get to step B and C and D. And now being in step B and maybe C in my life, I want to ensure that I'm able to give back, because I know that is insanely important. A lot of people don't always have the most up-to-date resources or opportunities in order to get into the position that they're looking for. And sometimes you just need some inspiration, or you need some words of advice, or you need someone to vouch for you. And I hope that, as I continue to grow into my career, that I prioritize helping people make their first step into an industry that they're passionate about, whether it is advertising, social media, whether it is biology. If I can kind of help in some capacity, I think that is really what I want to continue to focus on as I get older in life, but also as I continue to just work at rising the ranks in this industry, because everyone, is always looking for a piece of advice on how they can start somewhere new.
Yeah, you definitely have helped this person. Even just your energy is like really reassuring. Like, oh, so there's like good people out there doing some good work. Like, I can tell you're a role model. Let's just
Thank you.
call it what it is.
I appreciate that. I have a long way to go, but I've learned a lot over the years. Again, I just want to ensure that I am prioritizing giving back, because I read a lot of books, and I've just read, the importance of having someone in your life be a mentor. And not saying that at 27, I can't even have a mentor, but what I'm more so just saying is that I want to ensure that I can figure out ways that I can actually be a mentor to someone else, and help push them and accomplish the goals and get where they want to be in life. Because there's nothing like it doesn't feel better than just accomplishing what it is that you actually want to do, and getting that first job out of college, knowing that you just spent 4 years working your ass off, trying to get that first entry level job, and then you get it and you're still treated as like the junior employee. So it's kind of like a nonstop grind of being the young person, and being like the junior employee at times. And so sometimes you just want to figure out the best ways to kind of like navigate that and ensure that you're like standing up for yourself, and not just falling to, the corporate office politics at times. So I want to ensure that I could kind of help people stay away from that.
Beautifully said. Beautifully. Well, thank you to our listeners, whether this is your morning routine, your afternoon routine, or your routine before you go to bed. We are all about sharing knowledge and spreading love. So thank you again, and skirt, we're out.